Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, it's Wednesday. It's time for a AHDB webinar, and this evening we're going to look at pre-harvest preparations. We've got a real mix of different speakers, and we're all linked really to the many facets of getting ready for harvest and some thought process that you'll be having through harvest and beyond. So hopefully it'll be an interesting event for you. What we've got, let me move my box. All of you will be on mute, so you won't be able to talk to me, and I won't be able to see you. You will be able to see the speakers as we go through the webinar. You are able to send questions to us. There'll be a little control box on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can open that up and type a question into the box as you go. We can take questions as we go, or we can leave questions until the end. As you know, sometimes the questions get answered as we go through the webinar, so I'll leave it to your discretion to work that one out. We are aiming to run it for an hour. If the discussions are good, then we may run on to 8:10 or so, but it won't be much more beyond that. We'll just see how the time goes. We've got a lot of information to get through, so we'll try and keep the time as best as we can. There are basis and Rosso points available. If you contact us with your basis numbers or type them into the questions box, we can pick your basis numbers up there and get those awarded to your account. And we are going to record this webinar, so in the next day or so it'll be on our YouTube channel and AHDB serials. We are also on Twitter, AHDB_serials, you can see there, and more often than not you can find us and find much of the discussion at the hashtag #MonitorFarm branding there. So we've got some speakers. You've got myself to come first. We'll talk about combines and harvesting and harvest preparations in the field. We thought it prudent really to talk about training staff, getting staff trained up, and especially in this time of COVID, how we're going to work our way around that. So we're going to talk about that. We've got Andy Newbold from FarmSmart Publishing to come on board and give some insight on that. And then really, we know it's a very different year. There's COVID is one thing, but we can't forget a very wet winter, very wet autumn. A lot less wheat was drilled, a lot more spring barley was drilled. So what are we going to do with that? And we've got David Eudall and Anthony Speight. David's the market specialist or the head of market specialist, I should say, for arable, and Anthony is an arable specialist in the MI department. And then rounding things off, we've got Dhan Bhandari. Dan is a cereal quality scientist, so he will give you a good insight into what you need to look out for in terms of long-term storage of your grain, drying, any pests and diseases, and making sure that you've got a quality product to sell after harvest is done. So a really good suite of speakers, I hope. So to break the ice a little bit, really, we thought we're going to run a few polls, and we'll start off with one really now, and it's one from me really. What design of combine are you using? What design of combine have you got in the shed that you should be getting ready? Does it feature cylinders and walkers? And does it feature a cylinder and rotor? So you might have let's go back, cylinder and walkers, concave cylinder, rear beater, 4, 5, 6 or 8 walkers. Cylinder and rotor could be your typical large class Lexion APS system and twin rotors, John Deere CTS, Massey Ferguson Delta, that sort of thing. The single rotor, classically the axial flow, John Deere S series, that sort of machine. and twin rotors, New Holland CR, of course, AGCO Ideal, and of course a new player now in the scene is John Deere. So quick poll, let's see how we get on.
So you should be able to see the results there.
I can't yet.
Okie dokie, so I'll let you know what the results are. So 50% of people are running a cylinder and walkers, 13% cylinder and rotors, 7% single rotor, and 30% twin rotors.
30% twin rotors. Did you say 3-0,
yeah.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right, that's very interesting. That's very good. I suppose about where we thought it would be really. The majority being cylinder and walker machine, and I'll get back to why I asked that question in the next slide or two. So pre-harvest prep. If you're hopefully you're getting your grain stores done and they're dusted, cleaned out, free of pests. I don't think I need to dwell on that anymore. The one thing that we find that catch people out is combine updates, and that's not necessarily servicing, it's more software. It's in the cab. Are you getting into yield mapping for the first time? Are you past masters at yield mapping? Is everything up to date? Software between the farm's desktop software and the display, is all of that smooth and running? When it's the first day of harvest, you want this thing to run and run well. So get your software up to date. Dealer combine clinics are always useful to go to. I've got the picture of the old combine up there, the old Ransoms. If you're running one of those, there's probably not many dealer updates you can do, but the actual flow, certainly, no matter how long you've been driving a combine, there's always something you can pick up at a dealer combine clinic. So if your local dealer runs them, then do go along. They're always worth attending. Trapped and trailer combinations. A lot of grain to come off the fields at a concentrated time frame this year. There's a lot of spring crops in the ground. There's going to be a lot of trailers out there on the roads. Make sure your lights, the brakes, have you got air brakes? If you've got past the tractor, 50, 60 kilometers per hour, are your trailer brake combinations up to the job? Just make sure that that's a box that's ticked. Do you have a harvest plan? Do you know where you're going to go first and where the grain is going to end up? It's always an important thing. Staff training, I've got that there, but I think I'll leave that to Andy to tackle. But it's a key part of any smooth harvest. And gates and barriers. Who's got the key for that gate? Is that padlock rusted up? Have you removed that cultivator from that gate hole or the tree stump or whatever? Make sure you've got all those sorts of things cleared out of the way. So going back to the combine design, all I wanted to do here was really, if there's 50% of you that are out there going to run a cylinder and walker machine, you might have a rear beater separator, that sort of thing. You really need in a spring barley crop, to get 70–80% of the grain through the concave and gone away from the straw mat, and that's probably quite intensive thrashing up the front part of the concave there. So yeah, it's going to slow you down. Barley doesn't thrash out as well as wheat, as we all know, and it's going to slow you down. There's not much you can do other than take it as you go. On the below the cylinder and walker design, we've got the classic APS system from Class with the twin rotors on their larger machines, better at removing the grains, a bit more energy and power now going into separation rather than the walker design. So bit more capacity there. And then single rotors and dual rotors really much kinder to the grain, a little bit harder on the straw. They do most of their thrashing by straw on straw thrashing, so easy on the grain, a little bit harder on the straw, but we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as we go through. So One thing that came up to us is barley skinning. There was a report done a couple of years ago by the AHDB. If you Google barley skinning project PR592, you'll come across this report. And the jury's still out on barley skinning. Is it varietal? Think so. Is it conditional? I don't think so. Is it the way that it's grown? It's all still out, and breeders are trying to overcome the barley skinning issue, but it's still a trouble in the malting calendar. All I would say is, if you're combining, the greatest impact you can have on reducing barley skinning is just ease off the thrashing intensity. Of course, combining is a balance, not too tight, not too hard. If you get a dirtier crop, that's fine. The maltsters can handle a bit more admixture, they can handle a bit more awns. You don't have to get it completely clean from the combine going forwards. It can take a little bit of admixture in there if you're combining with a cylinder walker machine. Of course, rotaries are much kinder to the grain, much less skinning occurs. But of course, the pro quo of that is that if you're after your straw as well, it's a little bit harder on the straw. So it's always a balance, really. Combine losses, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It's always a hot topic, but you can see there's a little bit of details there on how many grains per meter square you find for 1 kilo per hectare of loss. And you can see where on the graph at the bottom of the page, we've got 1.5 grain losses and where that's most likely to come from. And Walker or Rotaros is about 1%, and then there's about 0.5% can come from other areas, depending on how thick your crop is. Rather than go through all the calculations, I found a nifty app that you can download from New Holland, and it's the grain loss calculator. If you search that, it's really quite a nifty thing. It will ask you your width of cut, the width of the combine body, your yield, and you can count the grains, and you can get a quick understanding of what your losses are. Putting some costs against losses. If we were to say we're in a 10-ton crop of wheat, and wheat is about 150, 160 quid, then at 1% losses, you're losing £15 a hectare, 2%, £30 a hectare. And you can see there's a quick ready reckoner there to get you a handle. Whilst it sounds a lot, if you're in a 10-ton crop of wheat and it's 150 quid, of course you're removing 1,500 quid worth of crop from the field. So perhaps you have to put these things into context. But it's a quick idea of how much it's costing you. To go a bit quicker, if it's showery rain, if you're having to push on, then you can see here, this is a typical loss curve, as they call it. So the more losses you have, the faster you go, the more losses you get. And just to push on to get to another increase of 2%, going up to 2% loss, gets you an extra 30% productivity with your combine. So if rain clouds are threatening, then perhaps it's the best thing to do to just crack on and get your crop in. If the weather set fair, then stick it at 1% and get as much grain as you can. Of course, going quicker, we can raise the header a little bit, and this is just a plug for the wheat growth guide, which you can download. And I won't read all of this out, but if you raise the header by 10 centimeters, then in a crop of wheat, you can reduce the amount of straw material going through the combine by half a ton a hectare, about 12% less. So that will give your combine a bit more capacity. Of course, that depends what you want to do with your straw, and if there's anyone wanting to bale straw, I've got you guys covered as well. Let's go. Straw useful for cash flow. The P&K loss is not as big as you think. We've got a calculator on the AHDB website that would help you calculate that. You may be more concerned about soil cover and ground cover, and perhaps that's another issue again. But yeah, the P&K loss is not as much as you think, really. If you're getting contractors in, beware of importing weed seeds. That's always you try and get a contractor that's going to bring you a clean baler if you're really hot on your blackgrass and your bromes, and work with a baling contractor. There's going to be an awful lot of straw come out of the combines in a very concentrated period of time this harvest. So the baling contractor is going to be flat to the mat to get everything baled. If you need to get those bales cleared, then you better work with him and get them cleared yourself, whatever it takes to get the field cleared. But it's working with your contractor, not against him, really. And consider the following crop and compaction issues. If you really need to bale your straw and improve some cash flow, then consider what's going to happen if it's moist conditions out there and there's a telehandler bouncing around the field all day. Drying quickly, just consider drying. We've got a bit more information on drying and getting your crops dry and what it would cost. But if you do need to dry your crops, as a conservative estimate, we think that you're drying, taking a percent out of a ton of wheat will cost you about £1.50, and that's conservative. Sometimes it's up to £2.50, depending on your system. So be aware of that. And now I'm going to hand over to Andy Newbold, who will take us through the implications of staff training through the COVID-19 pandemic that we're hitting.
Thank you, Harry. Just give me a thumbs up that you've got my whole screen there first, Harry, just to make double sure.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, you have.
So what I want to talk about today is obviously harvest staff training, something that should happen every year as required. But given the year we're in, there's a little bit more to it with COVID-19. So before I go into the detail, I've got a poll. So I think what I'll do is we'll just go to the poll for a minute, and it's a simple one. Have you got a temporary staff induction and training plan in place? Yes or no? And we'll just let that run for a moment and let you have a think about that, and then perhaps we'll see the results. Right, I think we've, there we go, 58% no, 42% yes. So I'm going to scribble that on my pad for a start, and perhaps, potentially, this brief session may give you a few pointers. So really, moving straight on, what does the law require? So irrespective of COVID, if you're an employer, Section 2 of the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974 states that it shall be the duty of every employer to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health, safety and welfare at work of all his employees. So that's talking about your duty of care to ensure that anybody who is working for you is safe. Now, that's irrespective of COVID-19. That is something which anyone who is working for you, your duty of care is to give them a safe place to work and tools to do that properly. Their responsibility is to work safely within the guidelines set. I will just give you the very brief disclaimer here, which is that we're not. This is not necessarily a technical training session. This is a principles to work with training harvest staff. So I'm not going to particularly talk about the intricacies of using your new John Deere X-Drive combine or your twin rotor CR elevation, because frankly I don't know and you do. But what we're going to talk about is the rules of engagement about keeping people safe, particularly in the light of COVID-19. So simple thing, risk assessment. Risk assessment is a dead straightforward procedure. Write it down, record it. First step is identify who's at risk, i.e. the people who are working with you, potentially people who are contractors, potentially members of the public, what the risk is, how severe that risk is and the potential outcomes and how likely it is to occur. So is it going to kill somebody? Are they going to catch cold and anywhere in between? And will it happen? Is it likely to happen or unlikely? And the controls you put in place to control the risk, and record it, write it down. You can use all kinds of tabulated formats like this. That's fine. The reality is if you have a page-a-day diary, write down and record the steps you have taken, because you may need to justify that at some point in the future. Alongside that, so we've worked our way through and said these are the hazards and this is what we're going to do about it. I'm really going to talk about COVID-19 now. And whilst we've all got sick of watching the news, and I for one, I'm trying not to pay too much attention anymore, because it gets a bit distressing if I watch the news every day. Social distancing is a phrase none of us knew 4 months ago, and we all do now. Social distancing has a big implication on pre-harvest training, because you can't just sit in the jump seat in the cab of the combine or in the tractor with somebody to train them. So you need to bear that in mind and think about planning your training operation and your working operations to maintain that 2 metre distance. I've talked about cabs and platforms. It's probably acceptable to ride around the field in a combine standing on the platform with the door open, talking to somebody, depending on how well you are holding on and that you are safe to do so because you have a handrail and so on and so forth. I certainly wouldn't recommend standing on the cab steps of a tractor while someone is driving around the yard. There's only one place to be, which is in the seat of the tractor or remote and talking to somebody in another way. So, you know, we'll start with social distancing. I don't know whether you can see or not, but I brought a few props in today. So I've got a nice bottle of 70% proof alco gel here, clear alcoholic alcohol hand gel. Obviously got my gloves and a mask. And you may think, oh, well, this is all going a bit far. But operator environment. Everyone who steps on and off a combine, clambers up the steps, uses the handrail, grabs the door handle, sits down, hands on the steering wheel, controls, panel, the lot. It's probably best to have one machine per person, if at all possible, and have a structured approach to keeping that area clean. So use hand sanitizer, use cloths, use wipes, use disinfectant wipes, use what you like, but have a structured process of making sure that when you leave a vehicle, you've left it clean. So if somebody else has to come and get in the cab, it's all covered. And again, that goes as far as hydraulic couplers, you know, power sockets, PTO. There's a whole series of interfaces between tractors and trailers, headers, combines, all the rest of it, which habitually, routinely, you will have to use all summer. And they're also, in medical terms, vectors for transmission of COVID. So you're going to have something in place to make sure that you can think about that. The simple thing is the hand sanitizer or some disinfectant in a spray bottle in the cab, and a cloth and gloves and things like that. We will also, just at this point, let's just have a chat about PPE. Again, gloves are all right to a point. Remember to change them. You don't need to keep one pair of disposable gloves for the entire season, much as it will pain someone who's having to pay for them, but they are disposable for a reason. If they get ripped or torn, they're no good. If they get filthy, remember, just because your hands are clean, you could well be just transferring contamination from point A to point B on the end of your glove. Likewise, masks, at which I hear everyone crying and saying, you've gone way too far now, Andy. The point of a mask is not to stop you getting a virus. It's to stop you coughing and breathing the virus all over somebody else. So the reason people use masks is because they're intended to protect other people from the wearer. And I won't say not a lot of people know that, but it's just worth bearing in mind that masks aren't necessarily there to stop you catching something. They're there to stop you giving it to somebody else. And as we know, there are people who are silently spreading coronavirus who are asymptomatic, which means they are not showing any symptoms whatsoever. So that's sort of PPE covered. The other thing which, you know, certain manufacturers have hooked onto very well, if you think about things like remote operator access, and we'll have a chat about technology. Obviously, there are things like that, like the COVID tracking app, and I'm more concerned about things like remote diagnostics. There are ways that you can see what's happening in your tractor without getting in the cab. If you've got telematics with Clash, you'll have that with the Combine. Likewise with John Deere with the My Operations Centre and the various interfaces which are available there. So there are ways to remotely monitor the operation and the location of your units without being there. There are also very direct ways where you can offer service support or diagnostic support with things like FaceTime through your phone, Messenger video, WhatsApp video. There are various ways. I think the key thing to bear in mind this year of all years is try not to get in the cab with somebody. Try to keep more than 2 meters away and find a way to explain using the technology. Everyone's got a mobile phone in their pockets. Most people have got plenty of data, and subject to a signal, it's a very, very, very good way of doing remote diagnostics and keeping people safe. The other,
Andy, I was
yes,
just going to just jump in there with a question, Andy, if I can.
Yeah, far away.
We've got a question coming. How can we get contractors that would come on site to respect risk assessments that you put in place on site, especially regarding COVID-19?
I think,
would you need them to have a plan as well?
Yes, I think you would, and it's realistic to expect them to take the job as seriously as you do. You can share your risk assessment with them, and because you know the stock answer will be a shrug, and we haven't got one of those. We just need to get on. But if you have a set of guidelines you're working to, there's no reason why you can't share them with them beforehand and say, by the way, ping them an email, send them it as a message, and say, these are the rules we're using. We'd appreciate it if you'd sign up to them too. You know, because a contractor will be going from farm to farm to farm, and it's not unreasonable to expect a professional operator to ensure that, you know, they're using PPE, they're sanitizing, they're cleaning, they're disinfecting, in the same way that you don't want to move blackgrass seeds from farm A to farm B in the back of the baler. My view is this is broadly analogous. You know, it's the same approach we're taking, Harry. How's that sound?
Okay, great. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thanks, Andy.
I've just got a couple of final slides, and I must confess I have swiped these points from the I think it's the Irish Association of Contractors, but they were really good points. So I just thought I'd like to take the point to go through them. You know, these are good habits. You don't have to disinfect the interior of your tractor or machine twice a day, but think about doing it regularly. Obviously, if it rains for 3 days and the combine parks on the headland, there's not a lot of point cleaning the cab unless you're working in it. But let's assume that you're working. Likewise, tractor cab door handles twice a day. Keep to the rules. No entry for others into the tractor cab with you. There are some very good graphics out there which I've seen, which you can stick on your tractor door, which says, you know, COVID-19, please remember I'm social distancing, don't get in the cab, you know, call my attention, I'll come out to talk to you, or give me a ring. You know, disposable plastic gloves are fantastic for opening and closing farm gates because you don't know else who's been touching them. No hand contact, no shaking hands. You know, I know the cynics say, oh, this is just you know, health and safety gone mad, but frankly, it's not. This is the transmission vector of how coronavirus passes from people to person to person. So have some good rules and stick to them. And then the next slide here, you know, if in doubt, check field and other instructions over the phone. Ring and double check. You can always get someone to send you a map via WhatsApp on your phone. Again, and I'll keep banging on about it, but keep to a minimum of 2 meter safety distance. If you're going to cough, try not to cough all over with somebody. Cough into your elbow. If you've got a mask, cough into your mask. Change your overalls for a fresh one each day, or use disposable overalls. Again, this is common sense. It's straightforward, and it's really what you should be doing. And again, bring enough food and drink to last a long day, and take rest periods where you get out of the tractor cab for exercise and fresh air at least twice a day. They're going to be long days. Having food and drink with you means it minimises the risk of having to get some from somebody else and have contact with them. You know, if you're lonely, you've got a phone, you've got a radio, you can talk to people as well. I think that's it for me, Harry. Anyone else got any questions now? or shall we move on?
I don't think so. No, we're pretty good, I think. I think what we'll do then. Well, thanks for that, Andy. You're going to hang on until the end of the webinar to take any questions. That's great. And so what we'll do, we'll have a bit of insight from market intelligence. Anthony and David are going to take us through a prospect for barley. Over to you, Anthony and David.
Cheers, Harry. Evening, everyone. Hope everyone's all well. I'm going to hand over to Anthony in a moment, but I just wanted to say a few words as we're here talking about harvest preparation and kind of thinking of it in a bit of a different way, because we're obviously talking about harvest 20 right now, and as Harry was saying at the start, we've seen a very volatile year of weather and a very different year of weather that's affecting the size of the wheat crop that we're going to have and the size of the oilseed rape crop. But I want to think a little bit further forwards as well, because I want to think about preparing for next harvest and next season. And you might think, why? And I think there's two very clear reasons for that. And I think Anthony's going to go in a bit more detail in a few moments' time. The first one is around the potential for everyone to try and rush back to plant as much wheat as possible after this harvest, because we didn't get much chance last year. We need into a bigger crop next year. And also, we've got to start planning further ahead, because not only are we going through the more liberalised trade through Brexit and negotiating a new free trade agreement with the EU and US, we're also going to be losing direct payments, and we know they're going to start reducing this year and will be reducing next year. So if you think about your cash flow and your budget and your business for the next 18 months to 2 years almost, it's going to be a very volatile time. So yes, we need to prepare for what we're doing now, but we also need to be thinking about how we're preparing for what's going to be happening in a year's time as well, because it's still going to be a very potentially risky time for an arable business and a risky time for a farm in general. So, thinking about now is important, but let's not forget that longer term picture as well, because it's going to be an even more difficult world to trade in over the next 18 months or so. I'm going to hand over to Anthony now to go through all of the details, and we'll both be around at the end to take any questions that you've got. So, Ant, it's over to you.
Yep. All right, thank you, David. Well, to start with, in this presentation, I would like to look more at a global picture and how that could affect our domestic pricing going forward. I then want to touch up on some of our domestic outlooks as we head into the next marketing year. And then from there, I would like to discuss drying barley for an export market. And then we'll go and talk about risks and opportunities as we head into the next marketing year. So to start with, firstly, this graph is the world grain stocks, the world's stock to use. And as we can see, in years when we have high stocks, our UK feed wheat price is severely pressured. As we can see in 2016-17, it went as low as £118 per tonne. So this, on the far right for 2020 and 2021, the USDA has forecast 18.8% on world stock to use. So that means we're heading to quite a bearish market that's quite well supplied. And at the moment, the UK market is insulated fairly well due to a weak sterling and pricing at import parity, as obviously we head into a wheat deficit. So just to expand on this, again, this is the global wheat supply and demand. Again, the bottom right, the two bars, we can see increased consumption, increased production, 773 million tonnes globally, which is increasing our ending stocks. And as we can see, our global stocks are going up, which will bear pressure on our global wheat prices as we enter the next marketing year. The same goes for maize. We've got increased production, increased consumption, and we've also got increased ending stocks. A lot of this is actually driven by US maize. They are planting a lot. It's recently been revised down, but they are still going to have a very high production as we head into the next marketing year. And this outlook for maize, I think, is something critical to engage with, because it will inherently drive wheat prices. And also we could see maize actually undercut our domestic pricing as we head into the depths of harvest for maize harvest in the Northern Hemisphere in September, October and November. So Black Sea maize, Ukraine, they've planted a lot, they export it as a cash crop. So that's something just to bear in mind as we head into the end of this annual year, that we could actually see pressure. And also there's significant pressure on maize prices globally at the moment. A lot of US maize, nearly 40% of it actually goes into bioethanol. And as we've seen, energy markets in the last few months have been severely pressured with the COVID-19 crisis. So that is just something to bear in mind as we go forward. So now looking more domestically, we've got a commercial ending stock of wheat of nearly 3.4 million tonnes. This hasn't come to too much of a surprise, as we saw the diverging spread between our May 20 and November 20 contracts. I believe the spread got up to nearly £14 at one point, which obviously gave growers, merchants the incentive to actually carry grain into the next marketing year, which we have seen. But we're still going to be in a large deficit, as we know, with poor autumn drilling, winter drilling, and all that sort of stuff. And the same is for barley. We're going to be in a exportable surplus. We've got a commercial end stock of over 1.2 million tonnes. But that's going to have to go somewhere, that barley is. And for the first half of the year, we do have access to the EU market, but obviously in December 2020, we've got the Brexit negotiations. We don't know what's going to happen with that yet. And so for the first half of the year, a lot of it could be front loaded. A lot of it could go to Portugal, could go to Spain, but we're hearing that Spain are in a surplus. Ireland have a large carryover. So where is this barley going to go? And this is leads me to my next point, that a piece of analysis we did was drying barley for an export market, mainly a third country. So when I say third country, I mean North African states, Middle Eastern states based around the Mediterranean Sea, you know, Saudi Arabia, we've got Algeria, but then obviously we need to get our moisture reduction down to 13% to access these markets. So this form of analysis is more about possibly mitigating a loss, but at the same time, it's quite interesting throughout the year how it can fluctuate, and actually exporting your grain to a third country could be an option. So I'm starting on the top left. So this is an AHDB export price. We collect this weekly. So it's 128 pounds per tonne. We take off a loading fee, take off a haulage fee of £6. So we're assuming we're going out the East Coast, £6 haulage. We're probably very close to the coast. So obviously, again, this can all fluctuate depending on fuel prices, haulage, etc., and also geographical location. And then we come out of our ex-farm price at £119.50. And then our domestic price, which was taken from our corn returns. So this is just a snapshot of a week in May when we undertook the analysis. So I'm working down to the bottom left now. We have 4 scenarios, 2 for export and 2 for domestic. So our exports are going down to 13, and our domestics are going down to 15 delivered into a mill in East Anglia. So we're basing all of this on 100 tonnes. So to start with, we need to work out the opportunity loss, so the grain weight loss from actually drying our grain. So as you can see in the middle there, we have the formula, which is how many tonnes of barley times the original moisture minus the final moisture, which is divided by how many tonnes of barley minus the final moisture. And this will give us a grain weight loss from drying. And as we can see, you know, in scenario 2, for an export market, we're going from 20% to 13%. We can see we lose 8 tonnes. But then in an ideal situation, domestically, in scenario 3, 17 to 15%, it's only 2.4. But we can then use this to work out an income reduction. So this is our weight loss from drying, which is then times by our ex-farm price to give us an income reduction. From there, we work out our fuel costs. So we need to work out the usage ratio. And in this analysis, we put gas oil at 1.2 litres. It takes 1.2 litres to dry 1 tonne of grain by 1%, and then kerosene it's 1.32. So this was just taken as an industry benchmark, but again, can change depending on equipment, efficiency, etc., etc. We also took gas oil at 47p a litre and kerosene at 22. Again, I think this is when fuel prices were severely pressured, but it will fluctuate with the global economy and fuel prices. And as we can see, to actually get a true ex-farm price, we get our ex-farm price minus our income reduction, so that's the amount of grain that we've lost through drying, minus our fuel costs, which can give us a true value for export. And actually, in this snapshot week, drying with kerosene for an export market was actually gained the most value for your ex-farm price. So moving on, we need to think longer term, cash flow and price risks for a UK farm and business as we not just head into the next marketing year, but we need to think about the next 18 to 24 months. So don't just think of a single marketing year as your strategy. We should think the marketing year after that. So in this graph here, we have our NOV19, NOV20, and NOV21 feed wheat prices against the 3-year average. And as we can see here, we've got NOV21, which is currently floating around the average, which can provide an opportunity and a risk as we head into the next marketing year. So obviously we've had a lack of wheat drilling and winter drilling, and the year just gone. We're gonna have many people, I know many folks are thinking this, I'm gonna plant the wheat that I didn't plant last year. But there are implications for this. If we suddenly have a surge of wheat plantings, we can see our NOV21 price will become severely pressured from going from import parity, which we're at the moment, great prices, we've got a weak sterling, everybody's laughing, but we can see that soon go down to export if the market realizes the implications of what's coming. So it's just something to think forward, not to think about next year, but also the year after. 3-year average at the minute, but when we've got another large crop coming, that will be severely pressured. So key points to take away from this, we've got increased grain stocks globally as we head into the next marketing year. Our values at the minute are insulated by a weak sterling and being at import parity to incentivize grain to stay in this country. However, we are at risk from cheap maize, especially from the Black Sea, as we head into the harvest in September, October, November. We can engage with export markets, which after December 20, we might actually have to do to third countries to sell our barley because we're going into a large production. So looking ahead, have you thought about the implications of cash flow marketing for the 21-22 crop year? Because we could see increased planting, like I've said, which will pose long-term risk of price movement. And this leads us to our question for the poll. Have you considered a marketing strategy for 2021-22 for your crops being planted this autumn? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Anthony, do you just want to talk through the results? Or David?
Yeah, I was going to say it's. I think that's pretty positive from our point of view. That what are we looking at there? Sort of 60–70% of people have either actively looked or considered that far ahead. And I think the key thing with this kind of discussion is to not just look once, but have a continued plan and an idea of what you want to achieve and what the financial risks to your business are. So I think it's okay looking at it now, and it's okay looking at it once, but something we need to keep on doing as we head out of this harvest and as we head into the planting window. It's something that's going to be more and more important. And I think the key thing really, it's understanding that impact of reducing direct payments, the impact that will have on your business, and the importance it then places on your marketing strategies as we go further forwards. So positive that people are looking, but got to keep on going with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cost control, and it's selling at the right time of the market as well. So they're both as important as each other. Okay, right. Thank you, David. Thank you, Anthony. That's brilliant. Right. Well, let's pass on. We've got a question coming up for Andy, but we'll whiz straight on to Dan, and Dan is going to take us through harvest quality. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Harry. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the quality of the harvest grain and the main points to bear in mind to maintain that quality and the premium of the grain. And then I'll be talking a little bit about moisture meter calibration and the issues of grain passport in the time of COVID. So to begin with wheat. So with the targets that the growers should be aiming for bread wheat, which is the hard milling, NABIM has got the specification for Group 1 and Group 2, and then also for the export market where you have UKP. In addition to the domestic specifications, you also have the alpha values there. And then going on to the softer wheats, the Group 3, which are used for making biscuit cakes and other flours, the protein content is obviously lower here, and the same with the UKS. The main thing to remember is that the rainfall at harvest can impact on the Hagberg falling numbers, and if the moisture is still high when you bring that into the stores, the deterioration of the Hagberg falling number can continue. So in terms of specification, I'm not going to go into great detail regarding malting barley, but the maltsters have different criteria for the precise malting barley that they take in, but the general intake tests are listed in the slide down here. So unlike wheat, the additional testing is for germination and for screenings. So in terms of how to maintain the quality of the grain, it's very important to think about storage, and this is going to be really key to making sure that the quality and the premiums are maintained. So AHDB have got the grain storage guide. That this is an essential description of the steps that you need to take to make sure that the grain is stored safely and effectively on farm. This is based on 5-year research that had been carried out and had input from farmers, grain traders, storekeepers, millers and maltsters. So the right storage preparation is going to be essential. You have to make sure that you have a regime for hygiene and housekeeping. Make sure that you're not going to be risking contaminating the grain that you have there. So you have to make sure that all the key equipment and the store structures, environment are cleaned properly, but it's also important to make sure that you have the right records and make sure that the storage facilities are clean and dry in good time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the things that can create spoilage of the grain in the stores. So spoilage can occur when you have inappropriate conditions, and so this can lead to the proliferation of fungi, insects and mites. So the insects, some of them can be attacking the grain directly, and then other insects and mites, while they may not be attacking the grain, but they will be carrying some of the fungal spores. And the penicillium fungus is particularly prevalent, and if it's not contained properly, it could produce the mycotoxin called ochratoxin A. So there are legal limits for that, but the important thing to bear in mind is that if you are keeping the moisture to 14.5 or below, then this will stop the fungus from growing and destroying the crop. So in terms of what you need to do to look at the correct moisture and how to bring it down. So the key thing is to bring the moisture down to 14.5. If the moisture of the combine grain is at 18 or above, then you must start drying that immediately. On the other hand, if it is below 18, then you can do that in a considered and well-managed time period. AHDB has got the safe storage time calculator. This helps you to calculate the time in days that you have to maintain the quality of the grain and the risks that the grain has, either from fungal proliferation, or whether it's going to be loss of germination or risk of attack by insects and mites. So you need to make sure that you have the correct temperature and moisture of the grain that you're going to be aiming for. So to give you an example, the risk of ochratoxin occurring within the grain. So with the higher moistures, even at low temperature, you will have only 9 days before that grain is considered to be safe. But as you reduce the moisture, you can see that you have greater than 100 days. On the other hand, if the temperature is higher, and then you can see that at the higher moisture content, your days where you can keep it at safe condition starts going down. So moving on to problems that the COVID-19 situation has posed for farmers who have their own moisture meters is to make sure that they're calibrated. And Red Tractor stipulate that calibration of moisture meters is one of the compliance points of their standards. So you have to make sure that the moisture meters are calibrated every year for both the moisture and also similar for temperature probes. So what Red Tractor have done is they've produced a set of guidance which says that if you can't get a service to come along to calibrate your moisture meter, then you have to think of other ways. So there are some merchants who are offering a calibration service. Now this can be done by either sending the meter by post to them, or they could be sending you reference samples so that you can calibrate the machine yourself. Also, if you do any of these different steps, you must make sure that you have documented that, and you have the records for that, and to show that what steps you've taken. And finally, going on to another issue of dealing with the COVID-19 is to do with the grain passport and the need for stickers. So that has now been addressed by Red Tractor. They have got a digital passport. This removes the need to have the stickers that you need to put onto the grain passport. So by using the digital version of the grain passport, you can edit the details, and this will give you all the information that's required, and that will be accepted. But to get hold of this digital passport, you need to register as a member and get it from the Red Tractor website through their Red Tractor services system, and make sure that all your details are correct. So I think I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dan, that's excellent. We're bringing everybody back onto field now. So yeah, any questions for any of the panels? We've got a few coming up here. Let me have a quick look. More comments, I suppose, than anything, but let me scroll down here. Really want a comment more than a question, I suppose, to Andy. If you're getting contractors onto farm and you've got a farm induction plan, you can get the contractors to sign it along with the temporary staff and I guess the permanent staff.
Absolutely, that's the perfect answer. Why have two systems when one will do?
Yeah. It's more of a comment than a question, really. Yeah. A question really for the panel. I don't know if it's David or Anthony that want to pick it up, but many farms will have tons of wheat seed that never got drilled last autumn, and so will certainly get drilled next autumn. So perhaps that's kind of set the die for wheat drilling in for harvest 2021.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You know, there's an incentive not only from a price, there's an incentive from a business point of view, and there's an incentive because people have leftover seed that they want to get in the ground. So yeah, definitely, I'd expect that, you know, we're going to see a big resurgence in the wheat area, probably at the expense again of spring barley, and from sentiment it seems at the expense of oilseed rape as well.
Yes, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, for sure. And a slightly off topic, or is it really? If we need to do a germination test on the wheat that's been in store over winter, can it be sent away? Yes, it can. The agronomy companies can handle that, or you can do a test yourself. You can do a home test, count out 100 seeds, and see how many grow, and adjust the seed rate accordingly. Really. Any further comments on that, David or Anthony?
Yeah, I think it's just a precaution, isn't it, really, just to make sure that actually what you've got is a viable seed. So you know, a small cost now may actually make a greater saving than sowing something that then doesn't germinate as you expect, and then having to go out and increase your labor costs and machinery costs and buy more seed. So I would probably be on the side of being slightly prudent in that example, and probably get a test just to make sure it's all right.
Yeah, great stuff. Just back to Andy for a quick question. What about advice on occupational health training? Is there any tech training that's out there that's recommended?
Regarding occupational health, if we're talking about occupational health, are we talking, I'm sorry to ask a qualifier here, are we talking about health screening, in other words, monitoring someone's health when they started and halfway through a season? Generally, manufacturers training will cover safety as it relates to the operation of that particular machine. There are specialist sort of Lantra trainers, if you like, who are doing operator training and general harvest training as well. I noticed that the National Association of Agricultural Contractors did a webinar for their members this morning, which was an hour-long webinar purely on harvest safety. So there are training providers out there, and whilst I haven't got the details of the training provider in question, that's via the National Association of Agricultural Contractors. So that's probably as good a place to start as anywhere.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks, Andy. And back to David, quick one. I have Group 2 Lily wheat for milling in Scotland. What premium is this likely to have over feed if it is 12.5% protein?
Well, this season we're seeing, you know, some of the largest milling wheat premiums over feed that we've had for the past decade, again because of the smaller crop. The price of milling wheat into the UK is really being dictated by the price of German wheat, and as Anthony said earlier, we're just trading at import parity. With regards to group 2 and being 12.5% protein, I think there's a couple of different things you need to look at here. It probably depends on the contracts that you're looking to sell. If you're looking to sell a full spec contract of 13% for a group 1 or 2, you're probably going to get quite a decent premium. I would say, without knowing exactly where in Scotland, it kind of depends if we're in the Borders or the Black Isle as to what that premium would be. The other side of things is, you know, if you've got group 2 and you're sort of 12.5% protein, you've got to be slightly wary of selling on a low protein contract, because some of those can have actually upper limits of protein levels. So you could be selling on a, say, 11.5 to 12 or 11.5 to 12.5% protein level. If you then go above that, you're outside of the contract spec. So I would say, you know, it's going to depend on region and contract you're looking for. But given the smaller crop that we're seeing, from an English point of view, really predominantly, that's helping to support milling premiums across the country. So, you know, if you're selling on a 13% protein spec on a full spec contract, if you've got 12.5, you're probably going to be getting, you know, a few pounds taken off with the fallbacks from 13%. If you're selling on a low protein contract, just be wary if that contract's got any upper levels of maximum protein levels. Other than that, you know, good quality milling wheat in the UK this year could be like hen's teeth. So, you know, it's worth keeping well. And I think following on from what Dan was saying earlier, you know, if you've got good milling wheat, keep it separate, keep it stored well, and make sure you're testing it really regularly. So if you've got a variable crop, you're keeping it all separate, because the you know, the good quality stuff is going to be attracting a higher premium this year for sure.
Great, that's great. Okay, right. Thanks, David, for that. I think what time is it now? Just gone 8 o'clock, so we're bob on time. I don't think we have any more questions coming in. So I think, yeah, no, I don't think there's anything coming in. So that's great. It just leaves me to thank all the attendees. Really, thank you all for tuning in. See if we can get to the next slide. There we go. So we've got our contact details up there. If any of you want to contact us, all of our contact details are there if you have any further questions. The next webinar is on the 5th of August, which seems like a long way away, but it'll soon come around. Nutrient management for harvest 2021, calculations and considerations, and same time, same place, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. So with that, thank you very much to all of you for tuning in. Thank you to our presenters, to Dan, to Andy, to Anthony, and to David. And we'll see you again next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.